So think about this. The United States is a brand new country, not even 30 years old, and it decides to go to war, again, with Great Britain, literally the biggest superpower on the planet. I mean, this wasn't just some small skirmish. This was a real existential test to see if this whole American experiment was even going to last.
And that brings up the big question, right? If the American Revolution was supposed to have settled all this, why in the world was there a round two? What could possibly drag them back onto the battlefield to do it all over again?
Well, a war like this doesn't just pop up out of nowhere. It was more like a slow burn, the boiling point of years of simmering anger and one provocation after another that finally pushed the U.S. over the edge.
And it really wasn't just one thing. It was kind of the perfect storm of grievances. You had Britain basically kidnapping American sailors, you had them strangling U.S. trade, stirring up trouble on the frontier, and back home, a whole new generation of politicians who were just itching for a fight.
Okay, let's start with this thing called impressment, because this was personal. I want you to imagine you're an American sailor on an American ship. Suddenly, the British Royal Navy stops you, boards your vessel, and just takes you, forces you to serve in their navy. I mean, can you imagine the outrage? This was seen as a massive slap in the face, a total violation of America's right to exist.
And all that disrespect, well, it lit a political fire back in Washington. You had this group of young, fiery congressmen. They got the nickname the War Hawks, and they were shouting from the rooftops that talking was over. For them, war was the only option left to defend American honor and prove to the world that the U.S. was not some country you could just push around.
So in 1812, under President James Madison, that's exactly what happened. The United States declared war. But, declaring war is one thing. Actually being prepared to fight a war, that's a whole other ballgame. The young country was about to learn that the hard way. And the early days, they were just brutal.
I mean, just look at how outmatched the U.S. was. The big plan to invade Canada? A total disaster. Meanwhile, the British Navy, the most powerful in the world, set up a blockade that just choked off American trade and left every city on the coast looking like a sitting duck. Yeah, the tiny U.S. Navy pulled off a few shocking wins, but let's be real, the big picture looked incredibly grim.
And then, in 1814, just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, it did. See, Britain had been busy fighting Napoleon over in Europe, but now that was over, so they could turn their full, undivided attention to the United States, and they decided to hit America where it would hurt them most.
British troops marched right into the nation's new capital, Washington, D.C., and they burned it. The White House, the Capitol building, just torched. This was an absolute, profound national humiliation. To a lot of people, it felt like the entire American experiment was literally going up in smoke.
But you know how it is, right? It's often in those darkest, lowest moments that you find out what you're really made of. The burning of Washington was rock bottom, for sure. But what happened next? Well, that's when a new, tougher American identity started to get forged in the fire.
And I mean this happened fast. Just a few weeks after the capital was left in ashes, the British set their sights on the major port of Baltimore. For 25 straight hours, they hammered Fort McHenry, which was guarding the city. The fate of Baltimore, and maybe the whole country, was hanging by a thread.
So picture this. A young lawyer named Francis Scott Key is watching this whole thing from a ship. And when the sun comes up the next morning, through all the smoke and chaos, he sees the American flag over the fort is still there. It's still flying. That incredible sight, that moment of sheer defiance, inspired him to write a poem that, you guessed it, became the Star-Spangled Banner.
But the war had one more, frankly, bizarre twist left. A little later, in January 1815, a general named Andrew Jackson led this scrappy group of American soldiers and volunteers to an unbelievable, crushing victory against a much bigger British army in New Orleans. It was this huge morale boost. But here's the catch. News traveled super slow back then. A peace treaty had already been signed in Europe 2 weeks earlier. The war was already over. Nobody there just knew it yet.
So after all that, what was the war's real takeaway? Well, if you only looked at the official peace treaty, you'd honestly miss the entire point. The real outcome wasn't written on a piece of paper. It was written in the spirit of the American people.
So, the official end came with something called the Treaty of Ghent. Diplomats from both sides, totally exhausted by the whole thing, basically met up in Belgium and just agreed to stop fighting.
And this is where it gets so interesting. On paper, the treaty was basically a tie. Nobody gained or lost any land. It didn't even mention the whole impressment issue, which was one of the main reasons the war started.
But in spirit? To Americans who were just hearing the news about that epic win in New Orleans, it felt like a massive victory. They had faced down the British Empire for a second time, and they were still standing.
And that feeling had very real consequences. It led to this huge wave of national pride. It also made the U.S. realize it needed a stronger, more professional military. And here's a cool side effect. That British blockade meant Americans couldn't buy foreign goods. So what do? You start making stuff yourself. It kick-started American manufacturing and made the country way more self-sufficient.
Which brings us all the way back to the beginning. After all of that, the defeats, the burning of the Capitol, the shocking victories, and that weird treaty, can we really call this America's second war for independence?
The answer? Oh, absolutely. Because, see, declaring independence is one thing. Proving you can defend it, that you can survive when the chips are down, that's something else entirely. The Revolution created the idea of America, but the War of 1812 proved its endurance.
So the bottom line is this. The United States walked away from this messy, brutal conflict, having proven to Great Britain and to the entire world that it was here to stay. This American experiment, it wasn't a fluke.
That struggle really defined what American independence meant back in the 19th century. And it kind of leaves you with a final thought, doesn't it? If that war was about proving the nation could defend itself back then, what defines and defends it today?